Laja decided to sacrifice his wife for wealth, ignoring the fact that she'd just given birth to their first child, rationalizing that she had become a burden and a source of his misery. Laja returned to the witch doctor, whom he had met earlier, who provided him with a calabash tied with black and red cloth. The witch doctor instructed Laja to use the calabash to perform the ritual, warning him that it must be done in secret and without his wife's knowledge. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on Laja as he returned home, the calabash hidden carefully. He waited for the perfect moment to execute the plan, knowing that failure would have dire consequences. Laja's heart pounded with anticipation and fear as he prepared to perform the ritual. The night of the ritual arrived. His wife had fallen asleep on the couch, her exhaustion from another late-night party. Laja saw his opportunity and retrieved the calabash from its hiding place. He approached her with trembling hands, the gravity of his actions weighing heavily on him. Laja began the ritual, circling the calabash around her head. He completed the first round, then the second, third, fourth, and fifth, his heart pounding with each pass. As he started the sixth round, she stirred and opened her eyes, her expression turning from confusion to horror as she realized what was happening. "Laja, what are you doing?" she screamed, trying to push him away. Laja's panic intensified. "Stay still. I have to do this." Her screams shattered the silence of the night. She leapt from the couch, trying to escape, but Laja, panicked and desperate, grabbed her. She fought back, her cries for help growing louder. Laja, driven by fear and the need to complete the ritual, tightened his grip around her neck. In a fit of desperation, Laja strangled her until she lay lifeless on the floor. The realization of what he had done hit him like a tidal wave. He had killed his wife in his quest for wealth, and there was no turning back. Laja's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to cover up his crime. He quickly rearranged the room to make it look like a struggle had taken place. "I need to make this look like an intruder did it," he muttered to himself. With a plan in mind, he dressed hurriedly and drove to the nearest police station. Upon arriving, he reported the murder, his voice filled with fake panic and sorrow. Detective Danku and his team followed Laja back to his home. As they inspected the crime scene, Laja's heart raced, and he prayed that his ruse would hold up. The detective and his team scanned the house, taking in every detail. As they finished inspecting the house, Detective Danku turned to Laja and offered his condolences. "Don't worry, Mr. Laja, we'll conduct a thorough investigation to find out what happened and who murdered your wife. We'll leave no stone unturned." Laja nodded, trying to appear cooperative, but his mind raced with panic. Just as the detective and his team were about to leave, Danku's sharp eyes spotted something. "I think we can start with this," he said, his gaze fixed on a CCTV camera in the corner of the room. Laja's mind went blank. He had cleared any physical evidence, but he had forgotten about the cameras. "What have they found?" he whispered to himself. "What's that, officer?" Laja asked, trying to sound innocent, but his voice trembled. "The CCTV cameras," Danku replied, his eyes narrowing. "Aren't they working?" Laja's heart skipped a beat. He had totally forgotten about the cameras he had installed in the house, and now they could be his downfall. Laja, trying to stay calm, claimed that the cameras hadn't been working for months. "They've been down for a while, detective." Danku, just to be thorough on the investigations, decided to check the footage. Laja's heart pounded as the detectives retrieved the CCTV system and began to review the recordings. The tension in the room was palpable as Danku clicked through the footage. As the detectives reviewed the footage, the room grew silent. At first, the recordings showed usual activities, and Laja started to relax. However, just as he believed he might escape detection, the detective paused and rewound back, citing something unusual, but at that same moment, a cough sound came from the spot where Laja's wife's lifeless body was laying. Laja's heart seized as the cough echoed in the silent room, his mind racing to deny what he had just heard, but his body frozen in terror. The detectives turned to check. What happened next was terrifying. Before the incident, Laja and Ada's love story began during their university days. Their days were filled with dreams and aspirations, but their reality soon turned challenging. After their schooling, financial hardships tested their love and commitment. Laja, an ambitious young man, dreamed of starting a successful business. One evening, as they sat in their modest apartment, he spoke with determination. "Ada, I know things are tough now, but I promise I'll build something great for us." Ada, a compassionate and supportive woman, held his hand tightly. "I believe in you, Laja. We'll get through this together." Their journey together was filled with challenges. Despite their struggles, Ada became pregnant thrice. However, their financial situation forced them to make heartbreaking decisions. Each pregnancy ended in an abortion, leaving both Laja and Ada devastated. One night, after the third abortion, Ada wept silently. Laja hugged her, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Ada. I promise, I'll make things right." The pain of their losses weighed heavily on them, but they continued to hold on to each other, believing that better days would come. Laja, determined to provide a better life for his family, worked tirelessly to set up a new business. Ada, ever the supportive wife, gave him all her encouragement. "You're my rock, Laja," she said, her eyes filled with hope. "We'll make it." After countless setbacks, Laja's perseverance finally paid off. His business began to flourish, and wealth started to pour in. Their lives began to change for the better. With newfound financial stability, Laja and Ada decided to try for a child once more. Their hopes were high, but fate had other plans. Despite their efforts, Ada could not conceive. They sought medical advice, and the doctor delivered a devastating blow. Ada's womb was damaged due to the previous abortions. Laja's eyes narrowed as the doctor spoke, his mind racing with doubts and fears. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the room, amplifying the tension. He glanced at Ada, sitting beside him with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with fear and sorrow. Laja's expression softened as he reached for her hand, a gentle gesture that belied his inner turmoil. "What can we do?" he asked the doctor, his voice laced with a newfound sense of responsibility. The doctor sighed, glancing at Ada before responding. "I'm afraid the damage is severe. It's unlikely that Ada will be able to conceive again." The words hung heavy in the air, and Laja felt a lump form in his throat. He squeezed Ada's hand, trying to convey strength even as his mind spiraled into chaos. "Isn't there any treatment? Any chance at all?" he pressed, his voice wavering slightly. "I'm sorry," the doctor replied, his tone compassionate but firm. "There are no guarantees. You can explore other options, but they may not be effective." Laja nodded numbly, his thoughts a whirlwind of despair and confusion. As they left the doctor's office, the sun blazed harshly overhead, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness Laja felt inside. Ada walked beside him in silence, her shoulders slumped, and Laja struggled to find the right words to comfort her. At home, the silence between them grew heavier. Laja's mind was a battlefield of emotions: anger at their situation, guilt over the decisions they had made, and a deep, gnawing sense of helplessness. He watched Ada as she moved about the house, her movements slow and mechanical. The weight of her sadness pressed down on him, and he felt his own frustration begin to bubble to the surface. One evening, as they sat together, Ada reached out to him. "Laja, we'll get through this, won't we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Laja looked at her, his heart aching. "Of course, Ada," he replied, forcing a smile. But inside, doubt was beginning to take root. As days turned into weeks, Laja's attitude began to shift. He threw himself into his work, using it as an escape from the painful reality at home. He stayed late at the office, attended more business meetings, and immersed himself in the world of commerce and finance. The distance between him and Ada grew, an unspoken chasm that neither knew how to bridge. Ada tried to reach out, her efforts met with polite but distant responses. "Laja, maybe we can talk to another doctor, get a second opinion," she suggested one evening. Laja sighed, his patience thinning. Ada, we've already heard what the doctor said. We need to accept it and move on. There's no magic to be done, he said, his tone sharper than intended. Ada recoiled slightly, hurt flashing in her eyes. I just want us to keep trying, Laja. I don't want to give up. We're not giving up, Laja replied, though his voice lacked conviction. But we can't keep dwelling on it. I need to focus on work right now. The nights grew lonelier for Ada as Laja spent more time away from home. She would wait up for him, the clock ticking away the hours, her hope dwindling with each passing day. Laja, meanwhile, buried his emotions deeper, finding solace in the success of his business and the distractions it provided. But the success came with a price. As Laja's wealth grew, so did his appetite for the finer things in life. Lavish parties, expensive gifts, and the attention of other women became a new outlet for his frustrations. The bond he once shared with Ada weakened, replaced by a growing sense of detachment. It was during one of these parties, held at an upscale hotel, that Laja met Alizia. Her vibrant energy and carefree spirit drew him in, offering a temporary escape from the burdens he carried. Their interactions started innocently enough, but soon developed into something more. Laja found himself drawn to her, the thrill of a new relationship blinding him to the consequences. As Laja's business continued to thrive, he became more involved in the lavish lifestyle that success afforded him. The allure of wealth and luxury began to cloud his judgment, and he found himself drawn to the attention of other women. One woman in particular, Alizia, caught his eye. Laja, you're always working so hard, Alizia said one evening at a lavish party. You deserve some fun. Laja smiled, feeling a rare sense of ease in her presence. It's been a long time since I let myself relax, he admitted, taking a sip of his drink. Maybe you need someone to remind you, she replied, her eyes locking onto him with an intensity that made his heart race. Their initial interactions were filled with light-hearted conversations and shared jokes. Alizia's company was a breath of fresh air for Laja, who had been drowning in the pressures of his growing business and strained marriage. She listened to him intently, her eyes never wandering, making him feel valued and understood. As weeks went by, their encounters became more frequent. They would meet for lunch at quiet cafes, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of blooming flowers. They discussed everything from business strategies to personal dreams. Alizia questions were probing yet subtle, making Laja reflect deeply on his life. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to live without all this pressure? She asked one day, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Laja sighed, gazing out the window at the bustling street. Sometimes. But then I think about what's at stake. You shouldn't have to carry all that weight alone, Alizia said softly, her hand brushing against his. You're allowed to lean on someone. Her words lingered with him long after their meetings, planting seeds of doubt about his current life and relationship with Ada. Alizia's presence became a sanctuary, a place where he could escape the relentless demands of his world. But Alizia's charm was layered with subtle manipulation. She never asked for anything outright, but her desires were clear. One evening, as they dined at an exclusive restaurant, she casually mentioned a new boutique that had just opened. I saw the most beautiful necklace there, she said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. But it's way out of my budget. Laja, caught up in the moment and wanting to please her, found himself visiting the boutique the next day. The necklace was indeed exquisite, and without a second thought, he purchased it for her. You're too generous, Alizia said when he presented the gift, her eyes widening in delight. But you really didn't have to. I wanted to, Laja replied, feeling a rush of satisfaction at her reaction. Their relationship deepened, and with it, Alizia's influence over Laja grew. She began to subtly criticize Ada, always framing her comments as concern. Do you think Ada truly understands the pressures you're under? She asked one evening, as they sat on the balcony of her apartment, the city lights twinkling below. Laja frowned, her words striking a chord. She's been supportive, but it's been hard. Maybe she doesn't see how much you're sacrificing, Alesia continued, her voice gentle. You need someone who appreciates every part of you. Alesia's manipulative nature was not overt but woven into the fabric of their interactions. She made Laja feel seen and appreciated in ways that were slowly eroding his loyalty to Ada. Her demands, though never voiced directly, were always met with Laja's eagerness to please her, creating a bond that was both intoxicating and destructive. Laja's infidelity began with small, seemingly harmless encounters with Alesia. However, these encounters quickly escalated into a full-blown affair. Laja, now entangled in his illicit relationship, started to spend more time with Alesia, neglecting Ada even further. Ada, sensing the growing distance, confronted Laja. What's happening to us, Laja? You're never home anymore. Work is demanding, Ada, Laja replied, avoiding her gaze. I'm doing this for us. The situation worsened when Alesia revealed that she was pregnant. Laja, we're going to have a baby, Alesia said, her eyes shining with excitement. Laja, caught between his responsibilities and his desires, made a decision that would change the course of their lives. He chose to bring Alesia into their home, believing that he could manage both relationships. Ada, upon discovering Alesia's pregnancy, was heartbroken and felt utterly betrayed. You can't be serious, Laja, Ada cried. Bringing another lady into our home? After everything we've been through? It's for the best, Ada, Laja replied coldly. Alesia needs support, and so does our child. Laja's decision to bring Alesia into their home created a toxic environment. Ada's emotional state deteriorated as she was forced to live with the constant reminder of her husband's betrayal. Laja, blinded by his newfound love and success, showed little remorse for Ada's feelings. Despite her emotional turmoil, Ada continued to hope that Laja would realize his mistake and return to her. We were supposed to be a team, Laja, she said one night, tears streaming down her face. I can't do this alone. However, Laja's actions only grew more hurtful. He and Alesia conspired to force Ada out of the house, seeing her as a hindrance to their happiness. One evening, the tension in the house reached a boiling point. Alesia's pregnancy was becoming more noticeable, and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words and simmering resentment. Ada sat in the living room, the warm glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. She felt the distance between her and Laja more acutely than ever. Laja entered the room, followed closely by Alesia, whose presence felt like an intrusion into Ada's space. The scent of Alesia's expensive perfume filled the air, mingling uncomfortably with the familiar aroma of Ada's cooking. Ada, we need to talk, Laja said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. Ada looked up, sensing the gravity of the moment. What is it, Laja? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. It's about the future, Laja began, avoiding her gaze. Alesia and we've decided that it's best if you leave. The words hit Ada like a physical blow. She felt the room spin, her heart pounding in her chest. Leave. This is my home, Laja. Our home. Things have changed, Ada, Alesia interjected, her tone surprisingly calm. We need space to raise our child. Ada's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Laja, hoping to find some trace of the man she once loved. Laja, please. We can work this out. But Laja's face was a mask of cold determination. It's for the best, Ada. You deserve to be somewhere you can find peace. The finality in his voice shattered Ada's last hope. She felt a wave of despair wash over her, the walls of the room closing in. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered, her voice breaking and tears streaming down her eyes. You can stay with family for now, Laja replied, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. Ada went inside, her legs unsteady, and began to gather her belongings. Each item she picked up felt like a piece of her life being stripped away. The once cozy home now felt like a prison, the air heavy with betrayal and heartbreak. As she packed, the sounds of her quiet sobs filled the room. Alesia stood by the door, watching with a detached expression, her hand resting on her growing belly. Laja paced nervously, avoiding Ada's gaze. Ada took one last look around the room, memories of happier times flooding her mind. She turned to Laja, her eyes red and swollen. "I never thought it would come to this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Laja's heart clenched, but he pushed the feeling aside. "It's better this way, Ada." With a heavy heart, Ada walked out of the door, the weight of her suitcase pulling her down. The night air was cool against her tear-streaked face, and as she stepped out into the darkness, she felt an overwhelming sense of loss. Inside, Laja and Alizia watched her leave. The door closed with a finality that echoed through the house. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with the unspoken consequences of their actions. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months since Ada left, Laja and Alizia lived their best lives. They went on a series of vacations, purchased luxurious accessories. Finally, Alizia gave birth to a bouncing baby girl, and Laja further showered her with expensive gifts and luxuries for making him a father. Several months passed and everything seemed fine. But something strange started to happen, and tension between Laja and Alizia grew. Laja business, once a beacon of success, began to face significant setbacks. Contracts fell through, clients disappeared, and the once steady cash flow dwindled. The financial strain took its toll on Laja, who found himself struggling to maintain the lifestyle Alizia demanded and the one they used to live. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Laja would come home late, his shoulders slumped with the weight of the day. Alizia, lounging on the plush sofa in their opulent living room, would glance up from her phone, a frown creasing her brow. "Laja, where have you been?" "Dinner's been cold for an hour," she would say, her voice tinged with annoyance. "I had a late meeting, Alizia," tuned Laja wearily, loosening his tie. "Things aren't going well at work." Alizia barely looked up, her focus returning to the screen. "You always have meetings. When will you make time for us?" The tension between them simmered just below the surface. Alizia's growing demands for luxury items and vacations clashed with Laja's increasing inability to provide. The once steady stream of wealth began to dry up, and with it, Alizia's patience. One evening, as they sat in the dimly lit dining room, the aroma of the untouched food filling the air, Laja finally broke the silence. "Alizia, we need to cut back. The business isn't doing well, and we can't keep spending like this." Alizia's fork clattered against her plate, and she looked at him, eyes flashing with anger. "Cut back? On what, Laja? I deserve nice things. We need to live good." "You don't understand," Laja said, frustration edging his voice. "We're on the brink of losing everything. The clients aren't coming through, and the money isn't coming in as it used to." Alizia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "That's your problem, Laja. You're supposed to provide. I can't live like a pauper." Her neglect of their newborn daughter added to Laja's stress. The baby, once a symbol of their union, became another source of tension as Alizia's irresponsibility became more apparent. The cries of the baby echoed through the house, a constant reminder of the fragility of their situation. Laja's attempts to talk sense into Alizia were met with increasing hostility. "You need to start contributing," he said one day, the desperation clear in his voice. "Maybe you can start a business or help with the finances." "Me? A business?" Alizia scoffed, her disdain palpable. "I just had a baby, Laja. Besides, I'm not meant to suffer." The arguments between them became frequent and heated, further straining their already fragile relationship. Alizia's disregard for their financial troubles and Laja's growing frustration created an environment of constant conflict. In order to save his failing finances, Laja began selling off properties and assets. "We have to sell the car," he said, his voice tight with stress, the echo of their once luxurious lifestyle now a distant memory. "Sell the car? No way, Laja," Alizia retorted, crossing her arms defiantly. "I need it." The sacrifices he made to sustain Alizia's demands only deepened his resentment. He felt trapped in a cycle of trying to please her while watching his wealth slip away. The man who once thrived on ambition and determination now found himself consumed by desperation and regret. The turning point came one evening when Laja, exhausted and emotionally drained, confronted Alizia about her behavior. The house was silent, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant car passing by. "Alizia, we can't keep living like this," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "We need to adjust." "I won't adjust for anyone," Alizia snapped, her eyes cold. "If you can't provide, maybe I should find someone who can." The words hung in the air, a chilling testament to the widening chasm between them. Laja's thoughts turned darker as he began to blame Alizia for his misfortunes. Her extravagant demands and reckless behavior seemed to be the root of all their problems. Desperation clouded his judgment, and he started to consider extreme measures to regain his lost wealth. One night, in a moment of despair, Laja confided in a close friend who suggested seeking spiritual guidance. "There's a pastor known for not only his God-given powers, but also his wisdom," the friend said. "He might be able to help." Desperate for a solution, Laja decided to visit the pastor, hoping for a miracle to turn his life around. Laja arrived at the pastor's modest church, a stark contrast to the opulence he had grown accustomed to. The pastor, a kind and wise man, welcomed Laja with open arms and listened intently to his troubles. "Pastor, my life is falling apart," Laja began, his voice filled with desperation. "My business is failing, my marriage is in shambles, and I don't know what to do." The pastor listened patiently before offering his insight. "Laja, your current predicament is a consequence of your actions," he said gently. "Ada, your first wife, prayed for justice. Her prayers carry great weight." Laja, taken aback by the pastor's words, felt a pang of guilt. "What do you mean, Pastor?" "Your betrayal and the way you treated Ada have brought these troubles upon you," the pastor explained. "The only way to begin to mend your life is to seek Ada's forgiveness and reconcile with her." Laja's pride prevented him from accepting the pastor's advice. "Reconcile with Ada? After everything that's happened," he scoffed. "I can't do that." The pastor sighed, seeing Laja's stubbornness. "Pride can be a dangerous thing, Laja. Remember, redemption starts with humility." Laja thanked the pastor but left the church, determined to find another solution to his problems. Days turned into weeks, and Laja's situation only worsened. His business continued to decline, and the arguments with Alizia grew more frequent and severe. In his desperation, Laja began to explore alternative solutions. He heard whispers of a witch doctor known for offering financial rituals and solutions to those in need. Driven by a mix of desperation and curiosity, Laja decided to seek out the witch doctor, hoping for a quick fix to his problems. Laja journeyed to a remote village, where the witch doctor was said to reside. The path to the witch doctor's hut was winding and eerie, adding to Laja's sense of unease. As he approached the hut, he felt a chill run down his spine, but his desperation for a solution propelled him forward. The witch doctor, an enigmatic figure with piercing eyes, listened to Laja's plight. "I need your help," Laja said, his voice trembling. "My business is failing, and I need to save it." The witch doctor, after a moment of contemplation, offered a solution, a ritual that required a human sacrifice. "The sacrifice must be a family member," the witch doctor stated coldly. "Only then will the spirits grant you the solution and wealth you seek." Laja was consumed by fear and confusion. "A family member? I can't do that." "You have 7 days to decide," the witch doctor replied. "Choose wisely." Laja left the witch doctor's hut, his mind in turmoil. Days passed, and Laja wrestled with his thoughts. The constant arguments with Alizia and the relentless financial strain pushed him to the brink. In a moment of clarity, he made a decision that he believed would solve his problems and rid him of Alizia's demands. Laja sat alone in his dimly lit room, his mind tangled in a web of worries. The witch doctor's chilling words still lingered in his thoughts. A family member must be sacrificed. He thought of his crumbling business, his endless arguments with Alizia, and the weight of his failures. Why must I suffer? Laja wondered, his frustration simmering like a pot about to boil. Alizia always wants more, never satisfied. She's the reason for my troubles. He felt like a bird trapped in a cage, yearning to fly free. Laja's mind wandered to Alizia's recent behavior, her late nights at clubs, her whispered phone calls with strangers, probably men. He pictured her wearing expensive clothes he couldn't afford anymore, likely gifts from another man. A burning suspicion fueled his anger. She's slipping away from me, Laja thought, his heart heavy with dread. Soon, she'll leave me for someone who can give her the luxury she craves. I'm losing her, and I can't stop it. As the shadows in his room grew longer, Laja's thoughts darkened. He imagined a life without Alizia's constant demands, without her nagging voice. He pictured himself successful, happy once again, and free, a life where every day wasn't a struggle. But then, like a flash of lightning, Alizia's smile appeared in his mind. He remembered their laughter, their adventures, and their warm moments together. Laja's heart ached, torn between his love for her and his desire to renounce back. The witch doctor's words whispered in his ear again, tempting him with a promise: only then will the spirits grant you the solution and wealth you seek. Laja's desire for success and wealth wrestled with his conscience. Slowly, a terrifying decision took shape in his mind, one that filled him with both horror and determination. He decided to sacrifice Alizia, rationalizing that she had become a burden and a source of his misery. Laja returned to the witch doctor, who provided him with a calabash tied with black and red cloth. The witch doctor instructed Laja to use the calabash to perform the ritual, warning him that it must be done in secret and without Alizia's knowledge. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on Laja as he returned home, the calabash hidden carefully. He waited for the perfect moment to execute the plan, knowing that failure would have dire consequences. Laja's heart pounded with anticipation and fear as he prepared to perform the ritual. The night of the ritual arrived. Alizia had fallen asleep on the couch, her exhaustion from another late-night party. Laja saw his opportunity and retrieved the calabash from its hiding place. He approached Alizia with trembling hands, the gravity of his actions weighing heavily on him. Laja began the ritual, circling the calabash around Alizia's head. He completed the first round, then the second, third, fourth, and fifth, his heart pounding with each pass. As he started the sixth round, Alizia stirred and opened her eyes, her expression turning from confusion to horror as she realized what was happening. "Laja, what are you doing?" Alizia screamed, trying to push him away. Laja's panic intensified. "Stay still, Alizia. I have to do this." Alizia's screams shattered the silence of the night. She leapt from the couch, trying to escape, but Laja, panicked and desperate, grabbed her. Alizia fought back, her cries for help growing louder. Laja, driven by fear and the need to complete the ritual, tightened his grip around her neck. In a fit of desperation, Laja strangled Alizia until she lay lifeless on the floor. The realization of what he had done hit him like a tidal wave. He had killed Alizia in his quest for wealth, and there was no turning back. Laja's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to cover up his crime. He quickly rearranged the room to make it look like a struggle had taken place. "I need to make this look like an intruder did it," he muttered to himself. With a plan in mind, he dressed hurriedly and drove to the nearest police station. Upon arriving, he reported the murder, his voice filled with fake panic and sorrow. Detective Danku and his team followed Laja back to his home. As they inspected the crime scene, Laja's heart raced, and he prayed that his ruse would hold up. The detective and his team scanned the house, taking in every detail. As they finished inspecting the house, Detective Danku turned to Laja and offered his condolences. "Don't worry, Mr. Laja, we'll conduct a thorough investigation to find out what happened and who murdered your wife. We'll leave no stone unturned." Laja nodded, trying to appear cooperative, but his mind raced with panic. Just as the detective and his team were about to leave, Danku's sharp eyes spotted something. "I think we can start with this," he said, his gaze fixed on a CCTV camera in the corner of the room. Laja's mind went blank. He had cleared any physical evidence, but he had forgotten about the cameras. "What have they found?" he whispered to himself. "What's that, officer?" Laja asked, trying to sound innocent, but his voice trembled. "The CCTV cameras," Danku replied, his eyes narrowing. "Aren't they working?" Laja's heart skipped a beat. He had totally forgotten about the cameras he had installed in the house, and now they could be his downfall. Laja, trying to stay calm, claimed that the cameras hadn't been working for months. "They've been down for a while, detective." Danku, just to be thorough on the investigations, decided to check the footage. Laja's heart pounded as the detectives retrieved the CCTV system and began to review the recordings. The tension in the room was palpable as Danku clicked through the footage. As the detectives reviewed the footage, the room grew silent. At first, the recordings showed mundane activities, and Laja started to relax. However, just as he believed he might escape detection, Danku paused the footage and rewound it. The screen flickered, showing the night of the murder. Laja's breath caught in his throat as he watched himself on camera, circling the calabash around Alizia's head and then strangling her. The detective and his team leaned in, their eyes narrowing in horror. "Laja, what is this?" Danku asked, his voice cold and accusatory. Laja's heart sank. "It's not what it looks like," he stammered, trying to find a way out. "Save it for the judge," Danku replied, signaling his team to arrest Laja. Laja's secret was out. Detective Danku's expression hardened as he turned to Laja. In a moment of desperation, Laja attempted to flee, but Danku and his team quickly apprehended him. The police arrested Laja, and he was forced to confront the reality of his actions. As the detectives closed in, Laja's world began to crumble. The sound of handcuffs clicking around his wrists was like a death knell, signaling the end of his freedom. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him as the reality of his situation hit him like a ton of bricks. Danku's voice was firm but laced with a hint of disappointment. "Laja, you're under arrest for the murder of Alizia." Laja's eyes dropped to the floor, his mind racing with thoughts of his failed plan, his ruined life, and the consequences of his actions. He felt a stinging sensation in his eyes as tears began to form, but he refused to let them fall. As the detectives led him away, Laja caught a glimpse of himself in a mirror. The reflection staring back was a stranger, a shadow of the man he once was. The weight of his guilt and shame crushed him, making it hard to breathe. The news of Laja's murder and the CCTV footage spread rapidly, shocking the community. Laja's fall from grace was swift and brutal. Ada, upon learning of Laja's fate, found a bittersweet sense of justice. The man who had betrayed her and caused her so much pain was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Laja's trial became a media sensation, drawing attention from all corners of the city. The courtroom was filled with spectators, journalists, and those who had once admired Laja's success. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the CCTV footage played a crucial role in sealing his fate. Detective Danku testified, recounting the investigation and the pivotal moment when the footage revealed Laja's guilt. The footage clearly shows the defendant performing a ritual and then strangling the victim, Danku stated firmly. Laja's defense tried to argue that he had been under extreme stress and that his actions were out of desperation. "My client was not in his right mind," the defense lawyer argued. "He was driven to the edge by financial stress." However, the jury was unmoved by these arguments, focusing instead on the cold, calculated nature of his crime. The prosecutor emphasized the premeditated nature of the murder. "This was no accident," the prosecutor declared. "Laja planned this and tried to cover it up." Ada, though not present in the courtroom, became a symbol of resilience and strength. Her story resonated with many who had faced similar hardships, and her quiet dignity in the face of betrayal and pain inspired those who followed the trial. The foundation she had started for abused women gained attention and support, growing into a beacon of hope for many. The verdict was delivered swiftly. Laja was found guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, and the courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and sorrow. Laja's once promising life had unraveled completely, and he was left to ponder the choices that had led him to this point. Meanwhile, authorities intervened to ensure the well-being of Laja and Alizia's child. With no family willing or able to take responsibility, their infant daughter was placed in the care of a governmental orphanage home. There, she would begin a new life, free from the shadows of her parents' decisions. With Laja out of Ada's life, she began the slow and challenging process of rebuilding. She focused on her foundation, pouring her energy into helping other women who had experienced abuse and betrayal. Her mission became her source of strength, and she found purpose in supporting those in need. One day, Ada met a kind and understanding man named Philip. Philip admired Ada's resilience and was drawn to her compassion and determination. They developed a deep bond, built on mutual respect and understanding. Philip supported Ada's work and encouraged her to pursue her dreams. "Ada, you're an incredible woman," Philip said one evening as they walked through a park. "You deserve happiness and success." "Thank you, Philip," Ada replied, smiling. "Your support means the world to me." Together, they decided to conduct a new medical test about Ada's womb at a different hospital. To their surprise, the results revealed that Ada's womb was not damaged as previously thought. The doctor explained that there had been a minor blockage from the abortions, but it was treatable. "This is unbelievable," Ada said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I thought I could never have children." "The blockage is minor," the doctor reassured them. "With the right treatment, you can conceive." Ada and Philip were overjoyed at the news, and the doctor prescribed medication to help Ada conceive. Months passed, and Ada found herself pregnant once more. The journey was filled with joy and hope, a stark contrast to the pain and heartbreak she had previously endured. Ada embraced this new chapter of her life with gratitude and optimism, determined to create a loving and supportive environment for her child. Please like and subscribe. It may look simple for you, but for us it's very valuable and it keeps us pushing to provide more interesting stories and tales, not just for your entertainment, but also for you to gain new experiences in life, to tackle new encounters. Thanks so much for your support.